Well, I'm in downtown Los Angeles today, and behind me is LA Live, the location of Season 2 Worlds. It was just a couple thousand people in an outdoor courtyard, but it was still really neat, one of my first events. And what we did not know at the time was that we were actually facing Season 3 Finals location, Staples Center. It was so cool to see a small event end up being in this huge arena just 1 year later. And it's these types of things that I think really show how big the League of Legends community is. That's why I'm so disappointed that as esports and League of Legends grow and get bigger and there's more investment, it feels like Riot's events are getting smaller. You see, I just think... Sorry to interrupt you, Travis, but this is a sponsored video. We'll be right back to your thoughts in a second, but first I have to tell you all about Rivalry. You can check them out over at rivalry.gg. They are a betting site, so you can actually bet if it's legal in your area. Only do it if it's legal in your area, but you can bet on esports matches. Now, you've probably heard that in other esports scenes there's been some shadiness around this stuff before. They are doing it legitimately. They're very different in the way they approach it. They've got educational information on their website that you can check out, and they're also trying to help support people like myself who create content and support the industry. So be sure to check them out. And by the way, I know this is a controversial conversation. Stick around to the end of the video if you feel like it, because I'm going to give you guys a chance to decide if this sponsor sticks around, and I'm going to give you some more information about them too. Back to you, Travis. All right, before I rudely interrupted myself, I was talking about League of Legends esports events. You know, a lot of people joke about how in 2011 Season 1 Finals took place in Freak's basement. Not the case, but still not too far from the truth. It was a sort of side event at DreamHack and happening in Sweden, a multi-game event, just a much smaller audience. And that's why it was really neat that in 2012, we actually grew a lot. We had Worlds take place not only at LA Live, but later on at Galen Center, at the USC Arena. It was really, really neat. 2013 got really cool. We actually had a dedicated LCS studio, so we had matches every week. No audience yet. But then we also went off to China, Riot's first international event in a big arena someplace else. That's where All Stars took place. And finally we came back for Worlds again in LA, but this time at Staples Center for the finals. 2014 though is when shit got real. We started traveling even more. We went to Paris for All Stars, and we had maybe what was my favorite Worlds to date, with Singapore, Taiwan, and Korea across all these different cities, ending in a giant soccer stadium. 2015 continued the trend, with Riot creating their own dedicated LCS studio directly across from their headquarters, and we crossed the Atlantic now to go to Worlds in Europe, where we traveled across Paris and Brussels and London and ending in Berlin. It was so cool. And by 2016, we were going to China for MSI before returning back to America to travel through historic cities with historic venues like San Francisco, the Chicago Theater, Madison Square Garden, and then returning to Staples Center to celebrate 3 years of awesome League of Legends esports. And then things got small. In actuality, the problem began at the end of 2015 when, instead of booking a big arena, Riot decided to host the All-Star event at the NALCS studios. They reconfigured it so that you could put more people in it, and they put a stadium outside in the parking lot, so it wasn't that bad, and I didn't worry about it in 2016 whenever we ended up going to Barcelona and had some cool stadium there. But then in 2017, things started to get more worrying. So Riot replaced IEM, which became defunct, with Rift Rivals, again deciding to host that at different studios around the world, like EU LCS or whatever, just again the small areas where they do LCS and weekly games. And then again, we went back to the NALCS studios for All-Stars for what might be the worst event Riot ever put on. They made no effort to change the arena, make it feel special. The whole thing just was kind of a bummer. Now it's 2018 and things are starting to get a little dire. Not only is Rift Rivals returning to the studios, but when MSI got announced, it was revealed that almost entirely the whole event would take place in Berlin at the EU LCS studio. Only 3 days of it are in Paris at a real venue. And while All Stars is taking place in North America, we don't know where yet, but based off of how 2 of the past 3 years have gone, I'm guessing it's the NALCS studio. Now, the reason all this matters is because the scale of a venue communicates the gravitas of an event. Now, Riot knows this. That's why they put a giant AR dragon into the bird's nest last year, and they continue to show photos of that. Whenever you see a giant arena packed with fans all screaming and watching a match, you know that this thing is epic. And yes, I would be remiss if I did not point out that they did just come off of their biggest finals ever, filling up this giant arena. The problem is that it's one night in one country
with 2 teams, and they followed up with what is objectively their worst event ever when they put All-Stars in the NALCS studio. This is not very fun to watch, and I think everybody kind of agreed with that.
Not that many people can fit in here, but we've crammed them in.
It also flies in the face of the story around all this right now. You have 10 teams that just gave you $10 million to get involved in it because esports is starting to grow to huge proportions, and you are kind of downscaling. Making all this smaller is also not going to increase investment, or more importantly, bring in the sponsors you need to fuel the investment you already have. Now, I talked about MSI and how almost all of it is at the EULCS studios, but of the 3 days that are in Paris, you only get to see 4 teams, and that event is taking place in a venue smaller and not as nice, quite frankly, as the venue that EULCS Summer was held at in Paris not too long ago. It's also obvious that Riot is trying to bring more of these emerging regions in. You know, these wildcard regions is what they used to be called. And that's actually great because LoL esports is a global phenomenon. It's a global sport. The problem is that they are also actively decreasing the chance that any of these regions see main stage play or play on the big stage whenever they don't have any more big arenas that are really hosting any of these events. Additionally, these events are a great way to engage local fans all around the world. I love going to them, and it's been so cool to meet fans all over the world that are there for their first time. It's such a different and kind of better experience than watching on Twitch or on YouTube. But whenever you keep sticking everything inside of a studio with a couple hundred people, these people are all kind of locked outside. And finally, you're taking away the glory from the pros. It is a huge difference whenever Faker walks out into Staples with a packed audience than whenever he's walking out onto the NALCS studio, which is possibly smaller than the studio he plays in Korea. And don't just take my word for it. You can take a look at this interview that I did at All-Stars.
I think they should, have it in an awesome location, the NALCS studio. I've been here a billion times. Last year was in Barcelona. That was an awesome experience. Riot took us out for a real Spanish dinner, and I just had a really good experience, whereas I feel like this is kind of boring for the players, it's boring for the fans. And I feel like for Riot, it's just, I would prefer to play in a big venue. I think everyone does, the fans prefer it.
And listen, I'm not saying that these events all have to scale infinitely and that everyone has to be bigger than the last. You'll notice that I didn't even mention NALCS Spring Finals happening in Miami at a much smaller event and venue than normal. I actually think that makes a lot of sense. They've had a hard time selling at 3rd and 4th place in the past for spring. It's less important than summer, and I'm sure there are financial concerns, so that's fine. Put that in a smaller venue and do something really big and awesome for summer. And even when it comes to Rift Rivals, it's a whatever event right before Worlds. I'm happy it exists, but it doesn't need to be super grand, right? The problem is when you take those 2 things and you combine them with things like All-Stars and MSI and just sort of the broader story, it just feels really bad. And I don't think that Riot is lazy, or that they're bad, or that they don't care about this stuff, or that they suck, which is what Reddit comments will inevitably be if anybody actually cares about this like I do. I just think it's a situation where, regardless of whatever strategic plan they have for doing this, the cons way outweigh the pros. So, I don't know, it's just a bummer for everyone. Worlds is going to be in Korea this year. I'm sure I'm going to have a good time, and these events are going to be fun to watch regardless. I think it'd be a little cooler if in 2019 we see a return to form for Riot Games in much bigger arenas. That's the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you next time.
Wow, what a great video, Travis. That was so good. All right, I rushed through the conversation earlier in the beginning of the video about the ad because I didn't want to have 3 minutes of conversation about it at the very beginning. But Rivalry approached me a little bit ago about working with them and them helping me make additional cooler content, basically by sponsoring it, giving me more funds to do cool produced videos like this. And at first I was kind of skeptical. Not so much in League of Legends, but in other esports like CSGO, there's been some scandals around gambling sponsors in the past and some really shady stuff, like the whole skin betting stuff, all that. These guys are trying to do things very differently, which is why I decided to take the chance on them. They have a lot of educational content. They don't want people to think that this is a way to make money. It's more of a way to sort of add an extra layer of excitement to it. I live in an area of the world where I can't actually even use the service. And that's why, I encourage people to only use it if it's legal in your territory. But they even went so far as to get a gambling license out of the Isle of Man, which is apparently, I learned in looking all this stuff up, that it's one of the more legitimate ways to approach this stuff. So they just have a very different tact. They're kind of trying to change the opinion of gambling sponsors in esports. Whatever, I can keep talking about this for a long time, but the whole point of it is they allow me to create more videos like this if you guys are okay with it. The whole point of it is that they will allow me to make more videos with this sponsorship, much like the one that you just saw, but I only want to do that if you guys are okay with it. So in the past, I did that how I make money and how I lose it video, and I talked about how I believe you guys are a stakeholder in this channel and part of it. I want you guys to tell me whether or not you want me to move forward with this. Leave a comment, tell me if you like it, if you don't. If a majority of you guys, if a lot of you guys feel really strongly I shouldn't do this, I don't want to do it. Also, by the way, Rivalry was completely cool with approaching it this way. So they and I will only do this if you guys are comfortable with it. Please let me know. Thanks so much to them for sponsoring this video, and thank you guys for watching.